So what would it take to get our leadership to move in the direction that you're talking? Is it public education? Is it books like this? Is it political leaders who will actually sort of break with what has been the bipartisan foreign policy consensus about the way we should deal with the world?
You know, sir, I think the only thing that's going to do it is another attack in America by Al Qaeda or a related group that kills tens of thousands of Americans, because then I think it'll become a grassroots issue. I'm almost of the opinion that it's like the environment. The government basically didn't do much about energy and environment since the first oil embargo in 35 years ago. Now we're seeing more and more everyday Americans buying hybrid cars and doing things to take care of the problem, or start to. I think it's got to come from the bottom up. And I don't think that's going to happen until we get attacked again. It's a callous thing to say, but I think it's the truth. Another point you hit on, though, I think is very important, and that is, for being the most educated country on earth, we are perhaps the least educated country on earth. The idea that our leaders should understand Islam and the intricacies of praying and Islamic history, that's important, but you can forgive them for not knowing those things. You can't forgive them for not knowing the history of our country. For Mr. Bush or Mr. Clinton or any of these politicians to think that we can take the American experience, which goes back to when? Runnymede in 1215, 800 years, and put that on a CD-ROM and give it to Mr. Maliki in Iraq or Mr. Karzai in Afghanistan in entirely different societies and say, here, take 6 weeks or 6 months and plug this in, to me, speaks to the ignorance of our governing class, of either ignorance about the American experience or disdain for it. That somehow it was easy for us to get from 1215 to 2008, that there wasn't world wars and civil wars and slavery and segregation. So I think we need a much more appreciative analysis of what America is and how it got to be what it is.
And is that what keeps us from morphing, changing into something else because of the way we misuse the instruments of war and counterterrorism to fight the terrorists?
I think, sir, that somehow we think, because we think somehow that the current American experience just popped up without any kind of work, and it didn't matter that we were an Anglo-American, Old Testament, English-speaking, Greek inheritance country, that we don't realize how we got to where we are. We think we can take our model and put it into a country that has none of that groundwork. Iraq, could Iraq be democratic? Why not? But it can't be democratic like we are until it has a different sort of philosophy, a different sort of religion, a different sort of society. We also have an extraordinarily hard time accepting that in 2008 there's anyone in the world who really believes in God to the extent that they shape every facet of their life according to that belief. We just don't want to admit it. We think it's archaic. We think it's silly. And yet, we have an enemy that's driven by their faith.
You're suggesting that the thing that might turn us around, God forbid, is another attack, but how can we be sure that we won't become worse after such attack? That we will do a kind of a Bush 2 in our response?
Well, it's a very interesting situation, sir, because there's really not much of an opportunity to do a Bush 2.
Yeah.
The one thing that President Bush has ensured is that if we get attacked again, we have absolutely nothing to respond against. It's another kind of first.
Well, you mean with or again? Say that again.
If we get attacked again, America will be standing, quivering with rage, with absolutely nothing to hit out against.
I see. No target.
No target that makes any difference. There's targets, but only targets that would make things worse. And that may be a first in world history. That, for example, the greatest power on earth could lose a city to a nuclear device and have absolutely nothing to respond against. I think right now, if it happened in the next 8 months, we'd kick hell out of the Iranians. But after that, there's no target.
I'm curious. You are a person who left the CIA. In some ways, you're a dissenter from American opinion. What have been the costs to you? And have you lost the support of your colleagues who were once in the CIA? Or I know you have not used secret sources in any of these publications. It's your ideas and what's in the public domain. But talk a little about that, because you're in Berkeley, and hey,
Yeah.
we're about dissent.
Sure. I think the bulk of what I say is boilerplate to the people who work this issue. There's virtually no one in the intelligence community at the working level or the mid-level management who thinks that this war has anything to do with the way we live or what we think. I don't know what the agency thinks of me. All of my work has to be vetted by them before it's published, and I get along very well with the people who do that. And I left, the only cost to me of what I've done is I left a job that I loved. I had no animosity toward the agency when I left. I still think it's the best place to work. I resigned because I thought the 9/11 Commission had hurt America by not finding anyone responsible for anything before 9/11. And I couldn't speak about that from the agency, so I left. So I have no gripes. You know, I think if I could go back to the agency, I'd go back tomorrow.
One last question, a brief answer. How would you advise students who sort of want to be involved in international politics, who want to represent the United States or work for the United States in dealing with the Muslim world?
I think my own view, and it's a terribly biased view, but I think the agency, as I said, is the best place to work in the world. I think it attracts the best and the brightest in America. And it's a job very worth doing, and it's a job that has kind of immediate gratification because it's something that matters every day.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you, Michael, for being here. I want to show your book and recommend it highly to our audience, whether they disagree or agree with all or some of it. It's definitely worth reading.
Thank you very kindly, sir.
And thank you very much for joining us for this conversation with history.